part of our agenda where I asked you to really think about what you heard from the presentation that the students gave, the presentations that each of the candidates have given, your own beliefs about what should happen related to our climate action plan for Kauai. And I'd like to get a proposal on the floor for 3 priority actions that could be included in climate action plan. And we're not going to go in order this time.
So Felicia, Cowden, I'm just going to say what I've heard, several really good points. Transportation is a real key issue. I really appreciated what Adam was bringing up on how we manage our shoreline setback in terms of the legality of it. I think that there's a really critical piece there. And then how we build this elements of resilience along really what is in our general plan update. And one of those really key pieces is complete communities, because when we do get blocked off in different areas, that would happen. So I'm hearing that as all of those seem, does it seem consistent to you guys? Yeah, so like we need to be looking at those things as a first part. What are your ideas?
What I heard as you were all talking is that we actually seem to agree on the top 3 priorities. It seemed as though we talked about how to balance and manage sea level rises here on Kauai, and we talked about different things. We talked about how it would affect private ownership of land, about beach, losing beach or preserving beach, and also about roads, about where they should be. So I think we talked about that. We also talked about food and how do we protect being able to be sustainable here on Kauai with our food. I also am concerned about trying to ensure that we do have safe water as well. And so those would be my 3 priorities. I think everything that everyone has talked about today are really sub-parts, at least from my perspective. I know that as a former state attorney general, I believe that if we ask to have a plan, an action plan created, that we should, as a council, identify what the priorities are, identify what the process is that we would want to see this plan come out of, but also to allow people who would be involved in getting this action plan together to really tell us what do they think in terms of our priorities. And so that's why I sort of talked about things in terms of those priorities.
What I suggest that you do, if you agree with some of the things that have been stated, it's a way of moving us forward. You might just state, I agree, or if you absolutely do, put forward, suggest something new. And let's see where we have some consensus. Milo, and then, candidate Spent, and then we'll go to candidate Excellence.
Well, I'm going to keep mine real short. I'm going to start with a motion that we based on this agenda, accept the Hawaii Community Foundation's offer of $100,000 for a climate change action plan.
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion of that motion?
All in favor, say aye.
I think on this one we don't need roll call vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Candidate Epson.
Yeah, the former National Science Advisor to the White House, John Holdren, would always say that there's 3 aspects to managing climate change: mitigation, adaptation, and suffering. And suffering. And it's not, funny. And for me, I'm always going to bring it back to mitigation at every opportunity possible, because I think it's always the one that gets lost in the conversation. Mitigation is reducing carbon emissions. And so I think when we are talking about where our emissions are coming from, it's really important to recognize that transportation is the #1 source of carbon emissions on Kauai, while emissions from electricity are trending downwards and will probably zero out by 2045. emissions from transportation are going in the wrong direction, right? They're going more. And that's because over the last 10 years, our annual VMT, vehicle miles traveled, is going up. We have the highest rate of increase of anywhere in the country, at least higher than any state in Kauai. And so when it comes to climate action plan, we need to frame every decision around trying to reduce VMT, reduce the amount that we drive. The number one thing, literally in all of the literature, well, there's 4 big things: land use, always, solid waste, transportation, electric vehicle infrastructure, and number 4 would be our energy sector. The things that the county has the most responsibility for, I think, is land use, and that's one, ensuring that we're building complete communities that people can walk to work and walk to goods and services, which is very difficult right now. Part of that is ensuring that there's affordable housing close to jobs. So I think for me, that's number 1. Number 2, as far as a priority list, is electric vehicle infrastructure. When we talk about climate change, we got to recognize
I'm going to ask you to really...
Okay. Sorry, I went quick on the first one, so I was going a little longer right now. But real quick, electric vehicle infrastructure. Electric cars are more expensive right now than gas cars. They will be for the next 5 or 10 years. Pretty soon, they're going to be cheaper, right? We need to get ahead of the curve, install the infrastructure now, and it's a good lever for reducing inequality, for allowing people to get access to those. And then just number 3, solid waste has to be a priority. Methane emissions from decomposing food waste in our landfill is one of the major drivers of climate change here and globally. And that's one lever that we can do pretty cheap, is reducing food waste in our landfill down to 0. So those will be the 3 priorities that I have.
We still have a number on the table. We're not narrowing it down to 3 at this point, but let's keep going. Candidate Chuck.
So I'm going to jump in on that bandwagon, because I think all of us have spoken to the need for us to look at solid waste, and we haven't had the real in-depth discussion about the implications and the need and applicability as it relates to the county operation. The mayor just cited a landfill at Mahalo, and while that might be up in the air in terms of its viability in the long run, I think that more importantly, the community and within our solid waste plan, we've absolutely said that we need a materials recovery center. So that is something of a priority. I think if we really want to make a dent in some of this, in this area of climate change and what we can do, I think we need to absolutely fund that and divert our waste stream.
Where they feel like like to make a motion on 3 priorities for the other candidates to consider. Do the MERV.
So I appreciate everything all the other council members have said. I'm a little frustrated to the extent that the county government is drowning in plans, and we never take any specific. We have tourism plans, multimodal transportation plans, we have economic revitalization plans, but nothing ever happens. So I'd like to propose 3 very specific things. We only have $100,000. We're not going to solve climate change with $100,000.
This is a motion that you're making
Yes,
at this time.
a motion.
Thank you.
So I propose that the specific action plan, following what Luke proposed, comes up with a study of electric vehicle charging locations to be proposed, specific and concrete. Funds a road relocation study, identifying the specific 6.5 miles of road that the recent release plan says are going to be underwater and lost, where and how those can practically be relocated, including a study of the land ownership, and then a analysis of our SMA rules to accommodate shoreline sea level rise issues in future planning. Those 3 things.
I'm going to say that I'm not going to support that.
Just a moment. Is there a second to that motion?
I wanted some clarification on your 3rd one, Adam.
Study of our existing SMA management rules and language to implement sea level rise concerns in those existing rules.
Related to building within that.
SMA permitting.
Tony.
I would like to,
Is there a second? Is there a second to that? Hearing no second. Are there any other proposals to be put forward? Any other motions?
All right, I would propose an adaptation of what Adam has suggested, and I would replace the part on the cars with, for the first piece, is looking at holistic watershed management. Because the cars is kind of attacking the capillary, and I think our watershed management is going closer to the jugular, because while
Could
we
you
might...
just state the things that you, it says we have 5 minutes. State the things that you would like to include in your motion. I'm so sorry to cut you off.
I already was stating that I would like to replace the first element, which is the electric cars, with a look at how we can do holistic watershed management.
And you would support the other two?
Yes.
Any other proposals to put forward? Any motions that you would like to put forward?
Chair, I would like to reiterate that I think that it would be premature for this council to put forward 3 action items without having a comprehensive plan, including community input and expert input in the most actionable and most likely areas that we can be efficiently applying the county's efforts.
Do the Murph.
I have a different direction, if I can say real quick, a little bit. If maybe 3, just because I think the specifics in the plan, we're saying we want to hear from the plan before we say what we want to fund. But I would say as far as the general direction of the plan, what if we include ensuring that this is a plan to get us to 0 carbon emissions by 2050, number 1, ensuring that it recognizes, as Adam was saying, the effects of 3.2 feet of sea level rise, what areas are being inundated, where we need to retreat, how a retreat method would look. And then number 3, somebody else figure out.
I would actually agree with you in terms of the first 2, and I would actually add waste management.
I would agree with all 3.
What is the second one, I'm sorry?
Just managing sea level rise, showing where the inundation area is and how we can manage retreat, what that would take. And maybe more specifically what Adam was saying as far as estimation is.
All right, so I'm hearing related to 0 emissions, related to sea level rise and road retreat necessarily, and waste management.
Yes.
Are the 3 proposals being put forward?
Madam Chair, I'll second that motion.
Any discussion related to that motion on those 3 priorities? Knowing that in order to move forward, community input would be a requirement to really determine how to initiate those actions.
Yes. Call for the question.
Are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
All right. All those in favor of 3 priorities for a climate action plan that includes 0 emissions, dealing with sea level rise and road retreat, and waste management. We'll do a roll call vote. Council candidate Sparks,
Yes.
Council candidate Epsilon,
Yes.
Council candidate Cowden,
Yes.
Council candidate Wilberstein,
Aye.
Council candidate Chalk,
Aye.
Council candidate Spint,
Aye.
and Council candidate Apollo.
Aye.
Well, council members, I really appreciate all of the thought that you have put into this and all the ideas that you've put forward. And the actual initiation of this, no matter what happens with the election, I know that you'll have an opportunity of participating in. So what I'd like to do at this time is turn it over, because I have a feeling that there are some questions that the public has for you. And David, I think you're taking care of this for us. And the way that this will happen is we'll go around, we're going to start with Council Candidate Paula this time. So the first question will be addressed to you.
What I was going to suggest is if we have a question of a specific candidate from somebody, they could answer that, and then they would not have another question. How would
Do
that
you
sound?
have some that are that way?
I think so, yeah. Some of them I don't know, I just have names of people who want to ask questions, so I'm not sure what's going to happen exactly. So this might be a bit of a juggling act, and we'll do our best. Laurel has asked to be first. Laurel Francis.
What can we give back to keeping Kauai green when we are dead? What should we do with our dead bodies? One way to give back to the earth is to plant unembalmed dead bodies in a forest park, a conservation green burial ground. Please set aside 10 acres in the 3 community areas that you're planning for a memorial sanctuary instead of a cemetery. Instead of a piece of lawn and a headstone, I would like to be planted in a bamboo casket 4 feet under my favorite tree. The way to find me or anyone else who chooses to be dying to come to Kauai is to look at the GPS coordinate. Thank you. So please.
I'm not sure that qualifies as a question, but it sure is an interesting comment. So, as you may know, we have questions coming in through Facebook also. So, Lana Olson is going to say the next question.
This is more of a general question. If elected to the county council, would you support changing council rules to allow the public to petition the council? And will you remove rules that limit council members from asking questions?
Yes.
So, the format that we had agreed to was that each candidate would have up to 2 minutes to respond to the question. If you don't want to answer the question, you could pass and it can go to the next person. So,
I would say if you have, it's a yes or no question, so if you have comments about it, take some
you don't
time.
have to take 2 minutes.
Right.
Clarifying the rules, I get to say an answer and then speak a little? Is that right? Do I get to answer the question and then speak a little?
Yeah, it's a yes or no question, so take it.
From what I understand on the question is, would the public be allowed to petition and also to remove the rule of limiting the time we get to speak? Is that correct?
No.
To clarify, it's to remove the rule that limits council members from asking questions of the public in forums.
Yes to that, removing the rule of preventing the public from asking questions. And I'd like to know a little bit more on the effects of petitioning. I'm not very familiar with it, but that's my answer to it.
Thank you so much. Now, these questions came from various places, so they didn't come in quite in order. So I'm going to call on Howard Johnson next. He was the first man on the list that I'm aware of from the list.
Thank you. I think we all saw that carbon dioxide spike on the students' chart, how it rocketed up like this. So I want to ask my partner Sharon's question. We got, the scientists say, the best scientists in the world, they say we got 12 years to get our carbon production down by 50%. 2 years ago, I went before the council and I tried to get some action on it, and I saw practically nothing done. How are we going to cut our carbon dioxide output 50% in the next 10 years?
Candidates, Spence, you want to tackle that one?
You know, I see Luke over there eagerly waving his hands. I'm going to lob this, I'm going to hand this one off to Luke.
Yeah, I can take it, and then I can pass on my other option. See what a cooperative council. Cutting it in half within 12 years. You know, we should be on track within 12 years to pretty close to like 90% renewable energy for electricity. So that's going to come down. We need to start. Air travel emissions are about 1/3 of our current emissions, which we need to recognize that we can't continue with the unencumbered growth of tourism because there's no viable there's no renewable electricity for flying an airplane. They're going to require jet fuel for a long time in the future. But we also need to recognize tourists are going to keep on coming. We're going to keep on having at least probably a third of our emissions from air travel, and it requires massive amounts of sequestration. So that's land set aside for growing trees. Lots of very smart people in Hawaii are working hard on doing that right now. We just need to be prepared as a council to facilitate that process as much as possible. As I said earlier, land use, making sure that everybody on Kauai has the option of living close to where they work. That means complete communities where goods, services, and jobs are close at hand. A lot of, the biggest imbalance we have between jobs and housing on Kauai is Lihue, 50% of the jobs and less than a quarter of the housing. So ensuring that anybody who chooses can live close to where they work. And then of course electric vehicle infrastructure. The problem with 12 years is that we're going to be right at this sort of parity point where electric vehicles get cheaper than gas cars at that, where it's going to be a little bit too late, right? So we need to facilitate that transition as much as possible through electric vehicle infrastructure to make it cheaper on Kauai in 5 years, right, by subsidizing it where we can. And lastly, the MRF, as you mentioned, right, zero food waste in the landfill, and that's just because food waste decomposes to methane in a landfill, which is a major driver of climate change. Outside of the landfill, you can compost it, it'll decompose into carbon dioxide, which is still a driver, but much less. And a lot of that carbon will go back in the soil.
The next question is, are you in support of changing the rules of the Kauai bus to allow people to bring bags on board? Currently, it is not allowed. This is one of the easiest ways to get cars off the road, as many visitors try to ride the bus from the airport, and residents could take the bus to the airport and save parking costs.
So, I'll go ahead and take that one. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I will tentatively say yes. And the reason I say tentatively is I would first want to talk to the administrative staff at the bus to find out why the rule was implemented in the first place and have a conversation with them to find out if there's a way to accommodate that and mitigate the reason that the rule was put in place in the first place. So I'm supportive of the idea. I do think that Kauai needs to work on its public transportation from the airport to the hotels and then have town trolley systems so that tourists don't have to rent a car when they come to Kauai. As a larger part of that, not only do we need transportation from the airport to the hotels and within our communities, running regularly in 10, 15-minute increments, but we also need to work on having ecotourism so that when a tourist comes to Kauai, stays at the Hyatt, they can get transportation from the hotel or from the airport to the hotel. They can go around Kaloa and the Poipu area freely and easily. And then when they want to go explore Ke'e and they want to go explore Koke'e, they have a trained tour guide who can take them and they can mediate the impacts that tourism has on our natural environment and include some environmental and some cultural education as part of the tourist experience when they come here to Kauai.
Thank you, Neil. Gabriella Taylor has the next question.
I'd like to talk about the getting down nitty-gritty, and specifically dirt. And why, I'm asking this question, why are we allowing the GMO crops that are harvesting great profits and leaving behind a lot of pesticides and harmful chemicals in the soil, when we need to find, as many of you have said, food security? We're importing 90% of our food. We could be cut off. And I'm so proud of these young people talking today about that. And I feel that I want the council members to figure out, whoever's going to be on the next council, how we can stop the GMO crops and neutralize the soil and grow food for people here, and also we can grow trees for sequestering the CO2. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass them down for sure. No. Yeah, of course that's my question. Well, you know, as all of you know in this room, we've gone through a long history at the county level at fighting for this right and to really transition agriculture in the direction that we want to. And I think that thanks to the county's efforts, we have made some ground now with the state on some of the pesticide use. Is there more? Always could be more. Always we should. I think I want to answer this question in terms of what we want and focus on what we want, which is food sustainability and a healthy environment. And really what it comes down to for me and what I've been focusing my time and effort on is building a new generation, a next generation of farmers. And so I've been helping farmers to create plans that are, again, a healthy, looking at community from a healthy standpoint, holistically, to put all the pieces together to be social economic viable entities. And so we need to really capitalize on that. Some of the mayor candidates have talked about not having even an ag department or an ag specialist position that was taken away. Those are things that I think we need to reinvest in order for us to have some self-sustainability here at the county level. I also think that we need an actual ag board or council that are made up of reputable farmers that can help us truly transition into building the small farms and farmers, because we know that housing starts to play into it, certainly zoning issues start to play into it, and we need to plan our agriculture development. It's the only way we'll keep Kauai rural. As far as the regeneration of soil, there are ways that we can clean our soil. There's many ways that we can do it, and we need to start now. And so I'm fully supportive of continuing that effort.
The next question is, what changes would you make to current zoning laws in order to protect coastal areas and areas that might be at risk for climate change, as well as support food security?
Candidate Robertson.
Aloha, everybody. So it's a big question with 2 minutes. So our comprehensive zoning ordinance needs comprehensive amendment to comply with general plan. But specifically with the issue about the coastal area, we've already removed the general plan has already called for removing all resort areas, so we're not going to have any more resort development on the coast. We need to implement the ordinances to change the maps to do that. We need to, as I was talking earlier about, we need to amend our SMA rules, which is not strictly speaking within the comprehensive zoning ordinance, but it works hand in hand with the zoning code as to how permits are issued and how land can be utilized. It's essentially the zoning code for the shoreline. So we need to amend the shoreline the SMA rules to accommodate concerns about sea level rise, so that when any permits are issued, the practical construction on the ground has to be built in view of those concerns and the fact or the expected 3.2 feet of sea level rise. They're in the process of finalizing a brand new erosion study for the island of Kauai, which governs how our shoreline setback ordinance operates. So we need to ensure that the new erosion study information is incorporated into our shoreline setback rules, which will require building further away from the shoreline on existing shoreline lots. In a nutshell, there you go.
Thank you so much. Well, these are some great questions and answers. Marge, into you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for running for office. It is one of the most significant things that can happen. And you're putting yourself on the line, and we are the benefit force. Thank you for your help. And I want to thank you for being here. And I'm going to admonish the usual suspects that have not showed up for any of these forums. Terrible for them. And they're running for office to represent us? Ha! I've been voting here for almost 40 years, and I've never, ever seen this happen before with these forums. And I want to put out a big thank you to the woman most responsible, Ann Walton, and her crew. My question is, we all know that the most vulnerable areas on Kauai are the sea level rises on the coastal areas, particularly as it relates to cesspools. Haven't heard anything about that tonight, even though Mila wanted to talk about it. How can we come up with a solution that is affordable for us as individuals, county, state, federal? It's a serious problem. It already has been a serious problem. With any sea rise at all or flooding, sewerage is running in Honolulu lawns. It's in the lawns of the Honolulu homes that people, our tourists come and wade through it in their raw, bare feet. What's the solution? Thank you.
Candidate Cowden.
Felicia Cowden. There is new advanced technology units, also known as aeration technology units, and there's a new company on island called Island Septic Solutions, and this is a really good Kauai-made product. It's a concrete, and these are really basically small wastewater management systems. They cost about maybe $25,000. They're not cheap, but they're not crazy expensive. They can go all the way up to being able to do something like 300 gallons per day. I mean, 300,000 gallons per day. So they can be big, and then of course those are more expensive. But the wastewater that comes out of this, unlike a septic system, is potable. And not that we're planning to drink that, but you could certainly use that for watering the lawns. You could take showers or whatever else. And this is available now. And when I look at some of these things that we could do, we can amortize wastewater systems. That's available. We can partner with the county or the state or even the feds getting wastewater grants. We've been looking at that. But so someplace like Honolulu, it probably wouldn't sit all the way deep in the ground. They can go up the way a regular mini wastewater system goes if it's sitting right on that piece. But when it goes out into what is essentially the leach field, it's a drip line. So when it goes out of the system, it's actually what's called R1 water quality. So there is a range of elements that are out there. We have to be creative in how we address these elements. This is something already here. I'm working on trying to help them promote this ability, and they're a great company. They're in Keikaha. Shout out to Cindy and Tom Goff. That's who this particular company is. But there are others, and we can address that. Costs some money, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I think funding is an important question for that. Jim Edmonds has a question. Oh, there it is.
Thank you. Maybe most people here know that I'm working hard on the housing crisis. And the question that I have is from my partner, Greg Crow, because he didn't get signed up. But we're working together on it. So basically, most of you may know that the Oahu mayor, Honolulu mayor, just put out an edict to everybody in the county that if anybody in the administration deals with any questions, they have to consider climate change and sea level rise. So if there's a subdivision being brought, recently they had a small subdivision near the ocean, and they cut it back by 2/3 of the number of houses that were allowed because those that were cut out would have been in the flood zones. So I have basically two questions, and I guess I know, Luke, is this your, no, I guess it's Norma's question. Basically, we know that we're going to be dealing with sea level rise. Anybody who questions that is blind or ignorant. basically, if that's already what we're considering, then why do we not have as a priority, beginning to move everything now, beginning to study what we need to do now to make sure that the roads, the schools, the hospitals, the police departments, everything that is crucial is not ready when we get there in 10, 20, 30 years or whatever the case may be. And I think most of you probably know that it's going to happen a lot faster. It seems like now that it's going to happen a lot faster than most everybody would. So if you have an answer for that. And then I have a little short aside, maybe you could throw in there. One of the things we could do for the environment is to get the public involved more. And we don't see any reason why we have to drive to the Hui to talk to our council. Why can't we do that with FaceTime or, you know, other ways that we could set that up?
Thank you. I think that I'll answer the second question because that's a lot easier. The second question is whether or not we could use existing technology to reduce the time that people are spending on the roads and using fossil fuels. So I certainly agree with that. In terms of looking at affordable housing, it is something that we're all dealing with throughout all of this island. I was born and raised in Kaloa, and I have to say that when Hurricane Iniki hit, I was responsible for a state agency, and I came in very early, and I noticed that around Kikula, the road was gone, and the ocean had taken it. And I remember crying when I saw Brennickys, where I spent almost every day of my life as I was growing up, and seeing the big boulders, and I was crying, and my father said to me, "But why are you crying?" Because this is what it was like in the 1930s. And that really taught me a lesson about where we live, and looking at the projections of the ever-increasing sea levels makes it much more serious and much more important for us to really address this. The other part that I've just recently experienced is that our son had a house, or has a house in North Carolina, in Surf City, right outside of Wilmington, and that is where the most recent hurricane just hit. And North Carolina had the opportunity to plan to move hospitals, schools, all of the public agencies away from these areas. And I think that we do need to start to think about that. It's going to be very difficult, because it will mean that we're going to need to work together with the state and the feds. And having worked in public service for all that time, I know how difficult that is. But I do believe that we do need to do that. It is time for us to not just plan, but to really look at new subdivisions and or new schools that might be being built, and really think about how it goes.
Thank you.
So, Sharon Guykin had a question. Would you raise your hand? I lost track of where you were. Okay. I'm sorry. She passes. Okay. I think I've gotten all the questions that were raised. Ken Taylor had one question. Wait to say that.
Thank you all for running and being here tonight. And what I want to say is that in December, when you're all sworn into office,
Yay!
one of the first orders of business that you'll be dealing with is the rules and regulations that govern how the council operates. You'll have an opportunity to vote on the resolution as it is today, or you'll have an opportunity to raise issues and make changes. My question is to you, and one of the issues was raised earlier, is that right now the rules and regulations say that if the public makes a comment, you cannot, as a council member, respond to those comments or questions. That's got to go. Second of all, For a number of years now, some of us have asked to include in that rules and regulations that at the beginning of each meeting, there be a 15-minute time period where the public can ask any question that you folks will have authority over. Many municipalities across the country have those in place. It's 15 minutes. If there's 3 people, they can have that 15 minutes. If there's 10 people, they get it divided down into zones. 15 minutes, but you don't answer any questions. You just take the comment publicly. And I'm asking you, when you're all seated in December, would you take the responsibility to make these 2 changes in the rules and regulations that govern your operation? Thank you.
I would like to pass the question.
Gina's offered to pass that along to me. You know, Ken, you know, part of the issue with having a 15 or 10-minute open session prior to council has to do specifically with our sunshine laws. And the reason sunshine laws exist here in the state of Hawaii is that it gives the public public notice a week in advance of any issue that's going to be brought before the council, so that honestly, so that a council member can't load the audience with a primer question that maybe didn't make it on the agenda or is getting pushed onto another agenda for various reasons. And so the sunshine law, all our state laws kind of work in 2 ways. They restrict, but they help. No law is perfect, but the sunshine law exists for the purpose of giving advance notification to the entire public about what is going to be discussed by the body and corporate. And this exists on boards and committees that I sit on now, as well as all the way up to our ledge and other committees. I think it's important that we follow the sunshine law, and that if there are changes to be made to that should be looked at by the larger political body of the legislature. You know, when it comes to question and answer, I think that is the rule was, I think, implemented because there was some attacks from the council to the members of the public. So I don't know that it was to stifle conversation at the meeting, but again, there's a duality to it. It exists to not only protect the public, but to allow the public to make a statement without being questioned or harassed for the line of statement that they're making. We can always suspend the rules and have those conversations. That happens frequently. And I think that one of the first things that we need to do as a new council is talk together about maintaining rules, but allowing for the rules to be suspended, but then re-implemented if it gets out of hand.
I would like to clarify that. No?
Okay, please.
I think what Ken was talking about was a 15-minute period of time that the public can speak to the council, and that there wouldn't be any decision-making done on those topics. And I think you're correct. The Sunshine Law requires the public to know exactly what the decisions are going to be made on. And so I would support having those 15-minute public presentations or discussions or comments from the group. I've also been in county council meetings where before there was that rule that county council members couldn't ask clarifying questions of the presenters from the public or from the county offices. And I was always confused about why that happened. But I do believe that less productive discussion has occurred because of that time period that is, you know, first of all, put on the public. And I think that it's more important to have this close communication between the council and the public as well.
We're going to give the next question to... No, she passed.
Okay.
To Mason, and then Norma, when it gets to you, we're going to pass you and go here.
Well, guess what? We don't have a next question. But we will if somebody from the audience would like to ask one. We now have the next question.
I'd like to more clarify the last question. It's 18 minutes that was in the rules previously, and it was for any agenda item, so it wasn't on anything under the sun, so people could speak to anything that was on the agenda, and that's why the office of the OIP office, which manages Sunshine Law, allowed it, and it was legal.
And I'd be in favor of that.
Okay, here she goes. Zoom in.
Now I'm getting skipped.
I want to know.
Closer.
Jim
Put the mic
things about what's the price of affordable housing, and I want to know what's going on in Hanamalu. Does anybody know what the prices are? I believe they started at $350, and are they out right now to $470? $450. So they're no longer affordable for the average person. For the average person. So I want to know what Jim thinks of what the price is for affordable housing.
Jim, yeah.
I think our,
We're on climate change, so. That you can talk to. I don't want to.
it's a good question though.
It is a good question. I'm willing to.
Another time.
No, okay. You have a question? Okay.
Hi, Sharon. How are we going to get community support? How can we get community support for these new ideas?
Whose turn is it?
So it goes to candidate Cowden.
Okay,
I don't think Adam had a chance to speak on the question. I think he skipped it. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Milo.
I think he skipped it. It's happened in another meeting, so that's he gets further.
So how are you going to get public support on all the things we've talked about? So I think that it's critical for the council to engage with the public to get anything done, to create the momentum within the council itself. And that takes individual council members going through outreach to communicate, to be open with the public, to hear their concerns, and to actively go to community groups, community meetings. If I, as a council member, am particularly interested in housing, guaranteed I'm going to be talking to Jim and the group that he's working with and engaging them to become a part of a housing ordinance that I might want to work on. And I will rely on Jim and the rest of his group to touch their friends and create momentum behind that ordinance so that when my agenda item comes on before the council, you all appear in the audience and you share your opinion with all these other people, so it's not just me telling them where I stand. So open communication from the council with the community and engagement of individual council members on the issues that are important to them can create momentum for all of these various projects.
Hold on 1 second. Are there other questions? Because if not, I see there is someone who wants to ask a question.
Oh, okay. Have we time for that? No. Are we okay?
Hey, my name is Dylan Thomas. Question for the incoming councillors here. Historically, over the number of years that I've been on Kauai, 11 years, most of the direction and focus of the council has been on developing other areas of the island as opposed to the North Shore. We're here on the North Shore tonight. Some of you obviously have vested interest in the North Shore. My question is to do with future planning of the North Shore, and a lot of the topics that you've spoken about actually obviously delve into the North Shore's planning. What is your opinion on how much focus you will place on the North Shore if you become councillors, when you become councillors, in terms of planning for the North Shore? We have a west. Thank you, sorry guys. The Lihui Rice Street plan was implemented, is being implemented as we speak. The West Kauai plan just began in the council. when is the North Shore community plan going to begin, and how do you see that we're all going to be part of this? I asked this, I'm part of the Kauai North Shore Community Foundation. We have a vested interest as a body to be part of that discussion, but there seems to be a very long-term timeline in when the county is going to approach what happens on the North Shore. And all these topics are on the North Shore. And most of the community, most of the visiting community comes out to Kauai. Where do they go? They visit the North Shore. A lot of these problems are based on the fact that we are a very popular destination. Historically, there's been no attention paid to the North Shore, and so we sit in this infrastructural deficit that we sit in right now. We face sewage problems, we face transportation problems, we face beach access issues. How do you as councils feel that you're going to tackle this, and how soon are you going to tackle this? Because we can't go on much longer.
We have just finished our general plan update, the Kauai general plan update, and so our North Shore development plan is probably 20 years old. This week, and I've been attending all the meetings, we're doing the West Side development plan. The last time the West Side got a development plan was 45 years ago. So they're kind of on the line right now, but in this process with the general plan update, there was actually quite a lot of conversation. They had consultants over here and were working with it, and I attended all those meetings, and very much what was said from the people is they really wanted to limit a lot of the development up here. That's challenging because that's what accelerates the cost. So when you have no development, then, you know, very simple houses go for $700,000 and become a tear down. What is a really begging issue is how much of our housing goes towards vacation rentals and visitor industry, and so that's where a lot of our inventory has gone to. There are ways that we can put in some more housing up here. The easiest way for me to see is through the additional rental units. If we do something like one of these things, is looking at wastewater treatment, because we can't just go in on top of a cesspool. Having a tourism plan is definitely something that, you know, it's really, we've gotten fast-tracked on that since the April 18th flooding in the end of the road. So it is happening, it has happened. We invite you in to talk more about it, and, you know, you're a little bit late because that happened last year.
Thanks, Felicia.
With due respect and love, by the way.
I do want to thank all of the council members. Since I've got the mic, I have a couple seconds because we don't have much time. But I also want to thank all of you for coming. And just to remind you that it's not enough to vote. You've got lots of friends and neighbors who don't know anything about what's going on. And if you can influence them to vote, it'll really help. So talk it up. Okay? Thanks.
Our closing portion of our council meeting is for each of our candidates to answer a wrap-up question, and they have 2 minutes to do this. And that question is, what do you think distinguishes you from the other candidates in regards to your position or thinking on climate change? And because council candidate Apollo got passed over last time, let's start there.
Thank you very much. And what distinguishes me from the other candidates who are running this year, and especially in the climate issues that we have, is obviously I'm going to live through it much longer than everybody else up on this stage. And probably a lot longer than everybody else in this room too, besides my other colleagues who have been leading some of our charge here. But I also think that I have the capacity to grow with the time and grow with the changes. The generation that I grew up in are making thousands of decisions in seconds, in minutes. We are conditioned to understand and learn at a faster speed, to adapt and to change with our environment. And we are a resilient community. We are a resilient generation. So are you, and we're learning the charge from you. What I'd like to part with, and which I didn't get to say earlier, I think the discussions are great, but the biggest bottom line for me is that a lot of the effort needs to be community-led and also government-supported. It's coming from Honolulu initiatives, it's coming from all of our community associations, it's coming from groups like the Kauai Community Coalition, who are stepping up and saying, we've had enough, we're going to be active, and we're going to include the young people, the youth, the voices of the younger people to stand up as well. And also, going from within, I've been meeting with a lot of our department heads, as well as movers and shakers within government who are saying, yes, we are actually tied around with our hands with a lot of bureaucracy, and a lot of government really is support. So if the people wills it, we will find a way to find the funding, we will find a way to meet the resources and do the connecting together. So my hope is, in my future and the future generations before me, is that we continue to work together like this. Thank you very much, and please vote for me this year, and I'll keep going for you.
Any question to Council Candidate Spint?
Thank you. What distinguishes me from the other candidates? The phrase that comes to mind for me is practical implementation. Having had some experiences, most people here know I've got a very wide bunch of experiences, everything from being a goldsmith to realtor to fireman to EMT to DLNR district land manager, to I've sat on a number of boards and committees. So those experiences, having worked as a private business owner, having started a nonprofit, a 501c3 community affordable housing land trust, sitting down and chairing a state committee that oversees $1 billion in state funds that develops affordable housing throughout the state, working on a union board, representing as a secretary treasurer and negotiating contracts with a private employer, having worked for the county as a fireman, and having been through the system and seen how the system works, and then having worked for the state and having relationships that I have and continue to maintain at the state level. So bringing those experiences to the table and adding to the conversation, but also looking at how do we practically accomplish implementation. One of the questions tonight was, how do we do this? There are steps, but you got to know how the government works. If you don't know how the government works, it's a lot of rhetoric. But we have to know how the government can actually take action in order to make action happen. And I think that's what I can bring to the table. Thank you.
Well, Michael, thank you everyone for the opportunity to be here this evening. I really appreciate being able to, sit around a table and hear from my colleagues who are running for a position on a council. And, I think, to turn the clock back 5 years when I was appointed in 2013 to the Kauai County Council, I had a specific interest in mind, and that was to build capacity at the council. And that was to be able to model what I believe are some of the behaviors that are necessary for good leadership. My background is in leadership development. I am a facilitator. The thing that comes to my mind, just this morning I was running a program for the Kauai Island Utility Co-op, their accountants. And because I'm a practitioner in Ho'oponopono, I've come to realize that working with these clients over the years, now 20 years, youth all the way to the corporate level, is that even with the best ideas out there, even with the greatest ideas and bright-minded people, that people get in the way of each other in making sound decisions. And it's the behaviors that we exhibit along the way that get in the way of being able to get cohesive decisions and cohesive teams. And so I think that that's what establishes me differently from others, is that I've dedicated my life to understanding what the dynamics of good leadership is and being able to practice it and put it into play. And that's what I'm there for, and that's what I've been there for the past 5 years. And I see great opportunity in being able to bring together people who can bring all the ideas that have been talked about tonight, but really work hard at unpacking them, even fighting about them to a degree of being uncomfortable and struggle through it, and then at the end of the day, come up with the best decisions and still do it with love. And I think that's what's missing from part of our system. That's why I'm continuing to seek an office, and I think I have a lot to contribute in that arena. I would say that I'm done.
Council candidate Robertson.
Aloha, Adam Roversky. So I'm going to touch back on one of Jim's last questions, and then I'll answer this one. So you asked why isn't there action right now on the sea level rise issue when it comes to the zoning code or the subdivision ordinance? And the reason there's no action is because our council doesn't make the laws to make action happen. I grew up here on the North Shore from the time I was a teenager, surfing and paddling and planting vegetables on my aunt's farm, who's sitting in the back. And I became a building contractor, and I quit, hung up being a building contractor, and went to law school specifically so I could arm myself with the skills to deal with the law. That's what the council does. I got a specialty law degree in environmental law and Native Hawaiian law at UH, and I came always with the intention of coming back to Kauai. That's why I'm here, that's why I'm running for council, because I want to take my skills as an attorney and my love for Kauai, and especially for the North Shore, onto the council to drive real action and not another plan that's going to sit on a shelf for 20 years. The council's great at funding plans, they're bad at taking action and looking forward to actually make the change. The council does two things. It makes laws and it decides who gets the money. So I'm especially suited, based on my background, to be on council to make the laws that we need to make Kauai a better place. And fix the laws that don't work.
I'm Felicia Cowden, and I want to first of all honor all my colleagues sitting here. We all bring something to the table, so I don't want to say what makes me better, I want to say what makes me unique. And particularly in climate change, something that will be of strong value for me on the team is that I have an active public relationship with the people. I am on Kauai Community Radio every week, and more than that, I was the producer of the year last year for Hawaii Television. This climate change action takes all of us. And it's inspiration, not regulation. So we can get some good regulations written, but more than that, we want to change our whole culture that's based on consumerism and convenience, and to take it on like the real critical issue that it is. And all of us can bring things to the table. All of us, meaning every citizen, can make their changes in their lives. And what we saw, for example, after the flood, which is what inspired me to run, was the capacity of the people to rise up and do what's needed in a crisis. And we have been allowed to feel like this isn't a crisis, that we will do it at our convenience. But we are in a crisis. We're not just in a climate crisis, we're in a housing crisis. We're in a series of crises. And so when we shift our mindset that causes us all to get together and engage, that's where real change happens. And I have been following issues. I'm at the council every week, pretty much for the last 4.5 years and the last few decades being active. I have the time to do this. This is my full-time commitment. It's my #1 priority. I will be at the community meetings. I've been at them. I'm out there. I'm on the action, on the job, talking to the people, bringing them in. With love and respect for everyone else, I want to be one of your 7 council people. Thank you. Felicia Cowden, vote for me.
I am running because of climate change. I remember sitting in my 9th grade life sciences class at Kauai High, learning about the devastating impacts of climate change, and yet we went election after election after election after election after election. And climate change hasn't even been brought up as an issue. Meanwhile, scientists have been getting increasingly dire in their projections for the future, increasingly vocal about the rapid rate of emissions reductions necessary to avoid some of the worst case effects. As we said, 0 emissions by 2050. I'll be 65 years old. That's well within my own planning horizon. If all goes well, that's well within my own political career. And we have to do this while facing devastating impacts from sea level rise, while facing an unprecedented refugee crisis, much of which will be from our cousins across the Pacific who lose their ancestral homelands, and facing bigger and wetter and stronger and more expensive storm units. And I think it's easy to look at that and look at this rate of change necessary to avoid some of the worst impacts, and to look at our totally dysfunctional political system or political climate in the U.S. and to put up our hands and say, I give up. But for me, I look at my daughter who's at home right now. I look at the faces of the kids who presented, the high school kids here, and we can't give up. We haven't even started to try yet. So I can't promise that we're all going to agree on everything all the time. I can't even promise that I'll always make the right decisions while trying my hardest. But I can promise that I will do everything I can to get to 0 carbon within my lifetime, or die trying. So thank you. Hope to do it with your support.
Thank you. I'm Norma Dr. Sparks, and people think that I'm a doctor, but I'm actually an attorney and a social worker, and I think that's what makes me unique among the people here with me today, is that I am an attorney, but I'm also tempered by my being trained as a social worker. I've also been a director of statewide agencies here in Hawaii, of 2 agencies, as well as county agencies in Los Angeles County and Santa Clara County, which is Silicon Valley. In my experiences in public service, I've been in charge of budgets ranging from $2 million to $40 million. And my last job, I had 14,000 employees. The thing that I think makes me unique is that I'm able to use all of those experiences and all of my training to help this county to become as best as it can be. I was born and raised here on Kauai, and I decided with my husband to return to Kauai because this is where we felt it was home. Most recently, we had our first grandchild, and probably I'm the one that distinguishes from you too, right? That I'm the only one with a grandchild. He is a year and a half old, and although he lives in California, I want to leave him with the experiences that I had growing up in the 1950s and the 1960s, where we could go to Poipu Beach and swim any time of the day, and it was always clean. It isn't today. And I want him to experience affordable housing if he chose to live on Kauai as well. I'm very able to work with people, to give them some ideas of my passion to make things better. And so I'm asking you today to also vote for me as one of your 7 council members for this year. I'm Norma Dr. Sparks. Thank you.
Well, that wraps up our council meeting. I do adjourn it. But before we leave, I want to thank the audience so much for the questions that you asked and for your attentiveness. I want to thank the radio audience for listening. I especially want to thank our council candidates for being willing to share your mana'o with us and to listen and to carefully consider all of the opinions that you've heard tonight. I'd also like to thank the sponsors of this event and the organizers. I know you worked so hard. It was very well organized, so thank you for that. I'd like to leave you with a couple of announcements. One is that you're invited to a talk story session on the charter amendments that's taking place on October 30th in La Jolla from 6 to 8 p.m. at HA, the coffee house on Rice Street. so that you'll be able to learn more about what those amendments are all about. And also, please, please, please vote. And so you can walk and vote for the next few days. November 6th is the actual election day. I'll be at the polls, working at one of the polls, if you're coming to Kauai Middle School. So it's just so important, and get everyone you know out to vote. We want to show the caring that this community has for our future. On voting day.
You can
On
register
election
at
day.
the poll. Yeah, you can register
Yeah,
at the poll.
so if you're not registered, don't worry, just show up election day.
With your ID.
Yeah, thank you,
With your ID and proof of residency. And the mail-in ballots are out.
So with that, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I do adjourn this.